everyone, how are you doing today? I am back this week to talk to you about another cultural dimension that is very important in order to be effective in collaborating and communicating in teams. And this dimension is called egalitarianism versus status. And basically, it answers the question, how do I prefer power to be distributed among among group members? And so I have a great story that totally represents what I mean by that. So at that time, I was working in Italy and I got an interview for an American company. I would be working in Italy for this European branch of the American company, and I would have reported to an Italian boss. But my boss's boss was the director of the team, and he was American living in the US. Okay. So I go into the plant where I would be working, ready for my interview with HR, my direct boss, and then I would have had a video call with the American leader. So, as it's common in Italy, when you have set up an interview, you go in like super formally dressed. You wear a nice jacket, blazer, and a nice blouse, pumps, right? Because as a woman, of course, the shoes are important and all of that, right? So I am totally formal, and I go in and I start answering, saying hi. Not hi, but good morning, good afternoon, Mr., Mrs., and their last name, right? And then after the interview that went very well, in the end of the day, I landed the job. I get to video call the American leader. And this guy is wearing a t-shirt, right? And he's like, hi, how are you doing? My name is Mike. And I'm like, okay, how do I answer now? Because I was so used, because Italian culture is much more status oriented than the American culture. I was totally used to the formality of using Mr. or Miss, or using last name, right? And this person that would have been my boss's boss comes in, and not only he doesn't introduce himself with his last name, not only he says, he doesn't say the full name, but he used the nickname. Totally difficult for an Italian be able to call this person, hi, Mike, how are you doing? Like, that's not how I would be answering, right? So luckily, I asked before connecting to what would have become my boss, my Italian boss, how I would refer to him. And he said, don't worry, go informal, because I was having this doubt in my mind. But back then, it was uncomfortable for me, right? And this is just to explain. Later on, I moved to the United States, and I start using nicknames, right? And I totally remember my boss once telling me, oh, thank goodness you call me Jeff, because if you were calling me Jeffrey, I would feel you were like my mother reprimanding me or something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I'm not doing that. Because again, right, you see the use of name is completely different in Italy and in the US. Not to talk about, again, Asian culture, right? Where you even think about Japanese, that you have to refer to Mr. blah blah san, right? Because you even use that honorific title just to show respect. So this is the story I wanted to talk about. So let me ask you this. Did you have a hint of what I mean by egalitarianism versus status? So let me tell you what these characteristics are, right? So in an egalitarian society, there is much less formality, and the distance between different hierarchical level is felt, the organization is almost flat. It doesn't mean it is in practice. Also, of course, in American organization, you have a boss over a boss over a boss, right? But they tend to be flatter. The number of layers is less than in societies or organizations that have a very status-oriented mindset. Also, egalitarian society are okay in having open discussion independently from your role and your status, right? So it's perfectly okay for a report to question and maybe even push back a little bit on what their boss say. In a very status-oriented society, vice versa, you would never dream of questioning your boss, especially in public, because what he says, it's a very top-down organization. And so you are much more of an executioner if you are on the lower rank. And the distance that you feel with that person, it's far away, right? So I perfectly remember when I was living in Malaysia, talking again about how people refer to each other, even among, let's say, my colleagues and my peers, yes, we were using name, but the plant leader when I was in Malaysia was Mr. Uy. All the time it was Mr. Uy. Nobody dreamt even remotely to talk to him with his first name, right? So again, a measure, a very practical, recognizable tip of what an egalitarian versus a status society looks like. Think about all the languages that have, let's say, honorific forms in their language, right? So if you speak Italian, for example, you know that you give a certain, like you refer to people that you look up to as with lei, right? That's the form. You don't say you. But you use this form, like in Spanish is usted or ustede, right? So all of these languages even have grammar specifically to refer in a way that is, showing respect, right? Versus, as I said, in English, in the American language, these forms don't even exist. And that speaks volume about how much more this society is egalitarian. Let me ask you this. Why do you think it's very important for people to recognize if they are more status-oriented or egalitarianism-oriented? I would love to hear from your comments. So if you want to share with me, please reach out at Simona at coachingwithsimona.com, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Talk to you next week. Bye-bye.